This second part of the return of the Anunnaki, we're really focusing on what we can do as individuals. Because, well, to be frank, what the elites want us to do is to make us feel that we are impotent and incapable of doing any damn dull thing until they tell us what to do. And then if we don't like it, well, we got to lump it. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think you should subscribe to that. I think what we have to do is just say, hey, this is my planet too, and I have a right to know. And you do not have a right to subjugate me and to make me your slave. And I think humanity is going to do that. You know, in the study of catastrophism, what is catastrophism? It's long periods of quiescence, hills and valleys, so to speak, which are then interrupted by punctuated moments of incredible violence that is going to completely remap the order of life on the planet. All right. And when that happens, folks are going to start looking for real answers. Now, the old question, where's the beef? And we're going to have a profound moment that will change us through this and also change our view of institutions. You know, if you look at what really started the Renaissance, and I discussed this at length in my book, Crossing the Cusp, and that is the plagues that swept through Europe. Devastating, devastating plagues. And people were turning to the church and saying, you know, you guys got this direct connection with God. You're supposed to be able to see this coming and deal with it and get it removed or mitigated. And the church was completely impotent and powerless to do anything. And so in a period of quiescence, where you don't have these catastrophic events or massive plagues sweeping through a continent, these institutions can do whatever they want to do. But when the going gets rough, the corrupt get going away, and they fade away. And that's what's going to happen here. And so for each of us, we need to think about that day when all of these institutions that are ramrodding things, and frankly, many of them are intentionally confusing and muddling our minds because it serves their financial interests and their power interests to do so, are not going to be able to do that. They're going to be obvious for what they are. They're going to fail for what they are. And then we're going to have to decide, how do we start over? In this program, I'm going to be talking to you with these guests about the people I think are going to do that, which I have identified as spiritual thinkers. You've heard me discuss this before, and so I won't belabor the point. We also cover it in the interview. But in this segment of spiritual thinkers, the largest statistical portion of this body of people, which I view as the most important population of human beings for our species in that time when we have gotten through the worst of the tribulation, what I call the backside, when things are starting to calm down and the world is going back to green and blue. And it will. It will be beautiful once again. And these are the folks that are going to be the ones that decide the outcome of where humanity is going. And this is as it should be. This is the intention, I believe, of Creator. It is our right. It is our destiny. But just as it is our right, it is also our right to lose it. And that comes down to you as an individual. And you're not pointing the finger at somebody else. You start by pointing the finger at yourself. You have to be a leader. And the first thing you have to do is be a leader of one and a majority of one. And so with that, let's get into it. And later on in the show, I want to talk about picking a good pistol for survival if you haven't done one already. I've been updating my research on that, and I'll be sharing that with you. But for now, let's get into it with Dan Dean and Richard Shaw. Shaw of Pinlight Productions in Hollywood and Dan Dean. And the best way for me to start this is with an email that I received from someone who's been following my work. Her name's Janet Weiss, and she lives out in Hawaii. And here's her comments. Marshall Masters, I have met and studied with Sitchin since the mid-1990s. He'd roll over in his grave if I did not respond to your Planet X theory. You failed to mention the whole thesis of his work. The Anunnaki race, which occupies Nibiru, One needs to read more than his first 12th planet book to understand what the Sumerian texts relate. The theory you have about 2 suns. I also lived at Mount Shasta, at the Monastery of the Seven Rays, the Temple of Sanada and Sanat Kumara, in the teachings written down by Sister Phaedra called the Scripts. She speaks about the day when we will look up and see 2 suns. You are the first person I have heard speak about that since 1973, when I started studying the Ascended Master's teachings at Mount Shasta. All right? And the rest of it, she goes on kind of a personal thing to me. And she reads the Colburn Bible, and she's looking forward to an answer. And, you know, she's right. I have really not taken the issue of the Anunnaki head on. I think, to me, it was always something that Sitchin does such an incredible job of it. I didn't see any need to be a Me Too fella. But now we are looking at this. And what I really want to explore, guys, is we're talking about all these things, and we're always saying, what are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? In this interview, guys, we got to start talking about what can we do, because there's a lot we can. All right? And with that, I'm going to throw it first to you, Dan.
Well, it's a big question, buddy. There's a lot we can. I think we ought to categorize, taking in light of what Rick was talking about, the evolution of a spiritual race. And we're not talking about a physical body. We're talking, yes, physical evolution occurs, but we're talking about a spiritual race here. Mm-hmm. We're at a point where we have the opportunity to evolve. Mm-hmm. Anytime you're on a fence, and the human race, as it is written in the Colburn, they have to be forced off the fence to either evolve or devolve.
Boy, we're getting forced, aren't we, Rick?
Okay. Yeah. So let's try to categorize who the people are going to be, the humans are going to be. Mm-hmm. First, we're going to have, and it doesn't matter whether you're in an underground bunker or if you are a shaman in the top of a tree in Africa or a regular citizen in a suburbia of America. It doesn't matter. I think we will fall into one of these 4 categories. Either we're going to be evolving and jumping to the next dimension, or we will be devolving because we failed to learn what we needed to learn in this incarnation.
That's interesting.
So if we screw the pooch, we're going to be back to Knuckle Dragon.
Or we have to learn it again, okay? And then there's those who will die during the entire situation, and they will have to face some sort of a guide or a judgment or something later, as a spiritual being, but it's not going to be a physical process that occurs while they're alive.
What do you think?
I think that first we should try to categorize those people that are here and where they might end up. Mm-hmm. Because there's multiple people, and I don't think, and I'm referring to a spiritual being here, not a spiritual evolution, mm-hmm. not a physical evolution. We know that, physical evolution occurs, but we're talking about very old spirits here that are incarnate. Mm-hmm. So I think that they're, like Rick was saying earlier, that we have an opportunity to evolve. So there's going to be those spirits that evolve. Mm-hmm. There's going to be those spirits that devolve while they're incarnate. Mm-hmm. Then there's going to be those who die in the process. And they may go through an evolution or de-evolution also in their spirit form. And then there's those who I'm not sure if there's going to be someone who remain. There's this thing that plagues us that says the meek shall inherit the earth. That may be a new earth. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who's going to remain. So, but that would be a different category of people if we need to talk about them, and they will have different needs.
Well, they are a different category, those who remain. I mean, you look at the Georgia Guidestones, it says keep the population of the earth below 500,000. Mm-hmm. It doesn't tell us how we get there.
Yeah, I agree.
The point being is that I see doctrinal thinkers, both in religion and science, and then I see spiritual thinkers, and the difference between the two, very simple, is doctrinal thinkers seek guidance, spiritual thinkers seek the truth no matter where it takes them.
I agree with that.
And that is that's the thing there.
Marshall, I agree with you, and then I think that there is a danger of getting too caught up in the dogma of religion so that you can't see the forest for the trees sometimes.
I will definitely so. I'm not, I think I've told Marshall before that I'm certainly not a religious person. I'm a very spiritual person, though.
You are very spiritual, and you're part of a group that, what I want to say to both of you guys, because to me, you're not only, you're spiritual thinkers and you're Christians. As I look at that 500 million that are going to survive this, all right, to me, the single largest demographic group of survivors are going to be spiritual thinking Christians. That is the single largest demographic. It's the reason why I am starting to talk to them, because I view them as being the ones most capable of ensuring our future post-catastrophe.
A question I would ask you, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts here are. If the planet does evolve and it jumps to a fifth dimension from a third dimension, do you feel like the survivors will be those that those who inherit the Earth, so we're speaking of, are the ones that are now in the new fifth dimension to rebuild what what is left of society? Or do you feel like that there will be a different, there are many philosophies and some science that says that there are 7 firmaments or 7 dimensions that actually create the Earth, and the Earth is the very center of those, each vibrating its own unique frequency, much like what Rick was referring to earlier. Explain to me your concept about what the Earth is going to do and what those who survive, where they're going to be. Do you feel like that this Earth is going to continue to exist, or do you think that the people jump to a different dimension, or does the entire Earth jump to a different dimension?
What I'm looking at is, and I base this on, I look at historical accounts. So you have Zechariah Sitchin, you have the ancient Egyptians, you have the ancient Hebrews, and there's folklore from around the planet. So what I am seeing is that we're going through a natural process. It will be a cleansing for the planet. But the people who get through this process, all right, people that really survive and endure, and not for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, we're talking about a process that's going to take years. It's going to be grinding. And a lot of people are going to fall into hopelessness and despair. And once that happens, it's a downward spiral. They're going to meet their end in any number of ways. The ancient Egyptians tell us about the great winnowing, where fear is going to winnow out a lot of us, because what is going to happen is a tremendous amount of fear is going to be whipped up, so much so that if you have malice and ego in your heart, it's like a lightning rod. It's going to pull these negative emotions into you, and your heart is going to be overwhelmed. You will die from fright. Just like the old joke says, I'm talking about something that's as serious as a heart attack. And literally, that is what we're told. So if you take all the moralizing and the theological aspects out of it, you just simply look at this as a very solid, simple basis of forces of love versus forces of fear. I see what's happening on the fear side, and they're pulling out all the stops. But I also see on the counter to that is the love side. Now, as a secular Jew, my viewing of Yeshua is as an ascended master was that he came and he planted the seed of our evolutionary thought. And that seed has taken root in many different souls and in many different ways across the globe. But out of that larger population, I see it bifurcated between the doctrinal thinkers and the spiritual thinkers. The doctrinal thinkers are going to be more easily seduced to the fear side of it. And so for them, I don't see any great advantage. But for the spiritual thinkers, regardless of what their faith is, if they have an affiliation, or however they walk with God, that is irrelevant. What is relevant about spiritual thinkers is, one, they have the strength to pursue the truth wherever it leads them. 2, their hearts are free of malice and ego. And 3, they live in a service to self mode where they balance their needs with the needs of others. In other words, they're thinking of the common good. And so this is a small subset of our current population. But as a catastrophism researcher, what all of the ancient folklore and history I have studied teaches me is that they are going to have a much greater ability to endure the deprivations and the hardships without losing their humanity. Ergo, they will be most likely to be the ones that shape that 1,000 years of peace that is predicted by prophecy. So that's my take on it.
Well, that's interesting, Marshall. I think it's interesting what's happening right now. I don't know if you guys happened to catch Coast to Coast the other night when Whitley Strieber was on.
I caught parts of it.
He started out talking about and I need to listen to it again because I don't remember where he said he had heard that this had happened, but that there were reports of people who had been missing or dead walking through the town.
That caught my attention. I heard that, yeah.
Yeah, that, and you know, of course, there's no way for us to vet that information. I mean, you'd have to have been there and have known those people in order to know whether that was for real or not. I mean, if I suddenly saw my mother walking down the street when she died in 1985 and had a conversation with her, then I would think, okay, this is real. Mm-hmm. But that is supposed to be a phenomena that's to occur at the very end of time. I mean, it's spoken of in scriptures, and it really I found it interesting to have listened to Whitley Strieber, who's probably the most listened to ufologist as far as being one of a person that was abducted, mm-hmm. talking about these scriptures in the New Testament. I was just like, wow.
Guys, when we come back into the next segment, let's start with this, and I'd be interested to hear your views about this, and I view both of you, as I said before, as spiritual thinking Christians, and to just talk that way to those who are like you. So basically, you guys could talk to each other. That's convenient. So hang with me, fellas. We're going to do that in the next segment.
Okay, looking forward to it, Marsh.
And I'm sorry I was a little late getting back to that. And looks like we've got a caller there in the guest room. I didn't get a chance to screen you. I'll bring you in and take that shot. Okay. You should be coming up here pretty quick. And caller, are you there?
I sure am.
Okay. Can I get your name?
Sure. I'm Derek in Michigan.
Derek in Michigan. What you got on your mind?
Well, you know, I've been researching this planet Nibiru, and you know, I've always thought it could be a possibility, and then when our pole is shifting, so that, and the scientists don't have a good explanation for why there's a pole shift and a wobble, so that kind of makes me think that the only thing that could be happening would be this extra magnetic force that we're not used to. So it makes me like really believe it. But I've been researching this alien phenomenon for a long time, and as a Christian, I have one question that begs an answer, and I'm probably not going to get it, but I'd like your opinions on it. Every time...
I'm not a theologian, so we'll just try to do our best.
Right. That's why I said I probably won't get a definite answer, but your opinions would be good, because I cherish other opinions rather than my own. Every time that somebody has a conversation that's documented and they ask the aliens about Jesus, they always say, they kind of almost laugh it off a little bit and say Jesus is one of us, and he came down in human form as service to others. But he's no more the Son of God than we are. So now what that makes me think is that are these aliens possibly Nephilim trying to lead us astray?
Well, I would say that an answer to that is you should go back to the earliest roots of Christianity before, the first pope and the Council of Nicaea. And this is pretty well documented in the Colburn Bible, particularly in the Celtic texts of the Colburn Bible at the end. And there's a couple of really, really exquisite biographical chapters on Yeshua, and you can tell by reading them that the biographer actually met Yeshua and his family and several principals. There was the ancient Celts loved Yeshua just as passionately as anyone else. And they, however, were on that side of early Christianity, which did not subscribe to the Trinity. And they viewed Yeshua as an ascended master. The side of Christianity that was in favor of the Trinity is the one that weighed in, and things went their way at the Council of Nicaea. So there is a historical disagreement amongst the earliest Christians. And early Christianity looked a lot different than it is today. In early Christianity, women were not kicked to the back of the bus as they have been for so many centuries. In early Christianity, they actually were the ones who led the services and taught the children. They were co-equals with their husbands. They had a very egalitarian approach, a very enlightened approach, and it was why it was successful. They were economically, actually, tended to be rather successful people living on the fringes of the Jewish communities at that time. So, yes, I mean, if you're going to say which position are you taking, is Yeshua an ascended master, or is Yeshua, the Son of God or God? For me personally, I think if you're saying these are things that are beyond, above my pay grade, all right, on a spiritual plane. And, it's one of those wonderful mysteries you're going to find and learn later on as you go. And what I have found is with doctrinal thinkers, it really conflicts with the dogma, and so they get very upset about it because it makes them uncertain about what they have subscribed to. Spiritual thinkers like Dan and Richard that you hear tonight are emblematic of a whole generation of Christians I see springing up. And it's really, I've seen this, I've been doing this since 1999. And I can, for the longest time, it was, everyone was focused on rapture, but I am seeing so many spiritual thinkers, and in that group, the spiritual Christians are very powerful. They're, to them, it doesn't matter. They don't need you to believe what they believe in, because for them, there's no middleman in the deal. So I don't think the right question is Jesus Lord, or is Jesus Savior, or is Jesus an ascended master? My question to you is, do you need a middleman to figure that out?
Well, what seems to me is we right now we live in a very barbaric world. I think it's on the outside it doesn't seem as it is, but there's a lot of people in great pain and great despair. With all our awesome technology that we have, all the awesome technology we have and the comfort that we live in, every person on earth should be just blissfully happy. There's not too many people in the world. What there's too much private property. I mean, I know people that own 250 acres and nobody is living on it. I mean, there's plenty of land. There's just it's too much. It's mine and not yours, and you can't go on it. I think. And what happened is the same thing was happening before when Jesus came down, and he tried to tell us, hey guys, you're doing the wrong things. You're all doing the wrong things. And then
you're thinking like slaves. That's what he was busting everybody's chops. He was going, you stupid idiots, you're thinking like slaves. You got to think about the time, okay? I mean, Yeshua was a Jew. He was a rabbi. He was a teacher, okay? There's no more higher position of regard, all right, amongst the Jewish people. So he was elevated that way. And he ran contrary to prevailing powers. But, think about it. Today, how many people are going, I don't know about Romney, I'm not going to vote for a Mormon, okay? And
yeah, me either.
All right, but then you got to ask the question, well, all right, you're not going to do that, but then you have, I remember years ago we had a list called, we did this back in, I think, 2003, 2004 on e-groups, and we called it the Armageddon topic or something like that. It was something really devoted to Christians in general, and it turned into the worst nightmares of my life because the group divided up equally in membership between Catholics and Protestants, and then it polarized. And it was only until that happened did I fully understand and appreciate Northern Ireland, all right? Because the group turned into a huge, ugly piss fight of cosmic proportions, and both sides hurling insults at each other and making demands at me as the list owner to punish the other guys. And we had a moderator, and this man was really wonderful. He was just a kind soul. And he was just trying to, hey, can we all get along? And he's like, boom, dueling Bible verses, and I mean, it's flying back and forth. And I finally got a hold of the support department at e-groups, and I said, how can I just dump this group on this guy? And they taught me how to do it, and I did. And then I sent him an email, and I said, congratulations, you're the proud owner of the group. Please, go away, all right? I don't want any more of it. And so you have that kind of contentiousness. And, I mean, Yeshua, he walked right into that. He was locking horns with vested interests. You know, temple priests, hey, they didn't want a rabble-rouser getting everything going. Next thing you know, the Romans get crazy and they do what they do best. They just start hanging dead bodies all over, walls and crosses and whatever they do, and having their good fun with it. And nobody could murder and mayhem like the Romans. And so you have all of those things. But again, what he taught, all right, is, the consciousness seed that he planted has endured over the millennia, and I see it taking root, and I see it as a very hopeful thing. It's a very, very hopeful thing.
I agree. During the famous missing years from age 12 to 30, Tibet believes he was there in Tibet, and they tried to kill him there, but he escaped back to Jerusalem. They have writings that say he was there.
Mm-hmm. And
they don't say him; they say a Jew, and obviously it would have been him.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he did. I think that he also showed up in England. Joseph of Arimathea owned tin mines in Great Britain, and at the end of the Bronze Age, Great Britain was the Saudi Arabia of tin, and tin mixed with copper gives you bronze, so it was a very essential thing. And it wasn't until we went into the Iron Age, which was really a result of meteorite showers that were dropping steel all over the place, and people are going, hey, this stuff makes better swords. And we got into that. But Joseph of Arimathea would go, and the ancient Phoenicians were the supreme, fantastic sailors of their day. They were crusty people. I'm not going to, they had their downsides too, but they built the fastest ships afloat. And they were the first nation that could navigate by the stars. Everyone at that time was having to follow the coastlines, which is a very slow and tedious way to get someplace, where by following the stars, they could make the trip up from their home port in Lebanon all the way up to Great Britain in a matter of weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. And they actually covered their routes went through the Mediterranean, all through the Mediterranean, and then up along Europe to Great Britain to the north and to the south as far as South Africa. And then they came to a screeching halt when the Romans torched them, and that was it. There's no more Phoenicians. But I think that Joseph of Arimathea, who was using Phoenician vessels to get to his tin mines in Great Britain during the time that those missing years, I think Yeshua went along with him.
I agree. So that goes back to my original question. I think we need to look out. I think some of these aliens may be during when it hits the proverbial fan, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, the guacamole hits the fan, as I like to say.
when they offer us a way out and they seem glorious, but they tell us that we don't need Jesus. Shouldn't we be aware of that?
I think you need to be aware of anybody that says don't think for yourself, period. Whether you need Jesus or don't need Jesus, or whether you need to eat or you don't need to eat, or you need to have your wife or you don't need to anybody tells you you're not allowed to think for yourself has not got your interest at heart, period.
I would agree with that.
And it's the thing of it is that when you are, exploring your connection with Creator, and you're doing it on your own, and that is a scary thing. And I'm not talking about just for it's scary for anybody. It's in a faith, and you have a way of believing, and you have the holidays, and you get there, and you go, and you have that wonderful time with family and friends, and it's important. And the minute you know that you're going to start breaking away from dogma and doctrine to go find your own relationship with God, you are way out on a limb by yourself. And you can bet that even folks in your own support network, spouses, friends, co-workers, where you're going to find a lot of them. They're going to be back there on the tree trunk with saws. Juba, juba, juba. And you're going to hear a very unsettling creaking sound underneath you. But that's where you have to be. That's what Yeshua told you have to be. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you see the halftime show? To me, that looked like during the Super Bowl. That looked like a lot of Illuminati worship to me.
I didn't see it. I didn't follow it, although I did watch the commercial with, Clint Eastwood. And, it's halftime in America. It's halftime in your America, bucko. It's not a halftime in my America. And I like Eastwood, but I don't think he had it right. I'm sitting here watching a Congress that's dismantling the Bill of Rights as fast as their little feet can carry them. And while, we have this gridlock so that nothing gets done for the rest of us out here in the middle class that are getting it up to Kazinga, they're out there and very quietly agreeing, hey, we need to eliminate these pesky little things like habeas corpus and posse comitatus. And they've done that. And now I'm sitting here reading Drudge Report, and what's happening? Harry Reid's going to take another crack at SOPA. And I followed into that article. And so, but it was obvious they're going to do that. They've got to close down the Internet. They've got to restrict access. They've got to channel the message the way that they want it. And the Internet is just too free as a vehicle of expression. And they're looking at the consequences of that with stuff like Occupy Wall Street, the Arab Spring, and elsewhere.
Yeah, there's no way pre-president Senator Obama would ever support the NDAA. He ends up signing it into law. Do you think the presidents know that they're going to be a puppet before they become president? Or do you think it's a threat? Do what we say and, we won't kill you, we'll kill your family this time.
Well, Obama, first off, I wrote an article on this on my site, and on YOWUSA.com, is hiding under the covers your plan for 2012, and in there I just said, Obama signed it, and then said, well, I'm not going to enforce certain provisions.
Of course he is.
Well,
if he's not, the next one will.
Yeah, the bottom line is the schmuck signed it,
Yeah.
And but on the other hand, like I point out in my article, before we take them to task, Republicans and Democrats lined up to do this. All right? This was like, if the Republicans were the we don't want more government kind of people that they're blowing smoke about, if they've proved anything in the last few years, is that they have ruled by minority, not ruled by majority. If they don't want something to get through the Congress, it's born dead. And this bill, no fanfare, no news reporting, it's just presented to the people as a de facto, here it is, you've been screwed. And the Republicans are out there lining up behind this thing, with the same troglodyte enthusiasm as Democrats. And so it's a pox on everybody's house, from my standpoint, huh?
We haven't had an honest election, I don't believe, in my lifetime. I really don't. If you look it up, half the people in our government are Masons. Ron Paul's a Mason. He says he's not, but his wife is an Eastern Star member, his children are Rainbow Children, and his dad was a Mason. So how is he not?
Well, all of that's going to happen, but, to me, frankly, I don't fixate on it because this is, as I've said often, the history of humanity is a book of many chapters. This is their chapter. They own it lock, stock, and barrel. You think you're going to get them off the dime. You're delusional. You're smoking the good stuff. Send me a box. But the next chapter in human history, it's not theirs unless they bluff us out of it. It's ours by intention. It is that next chapter where the meek inherit the earth, and we do evolve, and we do change, and we come through a terrible time which awakens us and brings us to our potential, all right, so that we're just not sitting here, to me, dogma and doctrine is like you're on a muddy road, and you get on the road, and you get your wheels caught in a rut. And so what do? You spin the wheels forward, spin them back, spin them forward, spin them back. These are debating the fine points like the number of angels on the head of a pin. You know what I mean? And it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you really think you're doing something really important because you're burning gas and there's fumes and the engine's roaring and mud is flying everywhere. But at the end of a gas tank, where are you at? In the same damn hole in the road. All right? The spiritual thinker understands, I don't need the car, and I don't need all the spinning wheel nonsense. I got 2 feet God gave me, and I'm going to get out on that road, and I'm just going to slog it through, and I'm just going to keep on going. And
well,
that's the whole thing.
We're all spiritual beings, and, we're spiritual beings. We're in the world, but not of it. And our hearts are going to lead us where we go from here on out. You guys have a great show tonight. I'm going to sit and listen to your guests, and I'm took up enough of your time.
Oh, that's fine. And, hey, I've got one thought for you. It's from Silver Wings in the chat room, and I thought this is appropriate. And he said, I think the meaning there is we are all the sons and daughters of God and are all capable of the miracles that Jesus performed. I think that's about the best answer you could have gotten.
It is. I agree. But that we just got to remember that power doesn't come from us. It comes from God. That's where people lose sight. I hear a lot of people. They can do this, and they always fail to mention God. It's like, just remember, that you have nothing if it's not for God. Just remember that every time.
Hey, get up every morning and say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you got to do. All right. Thank you so much for calling in. And so that was a great call. And we're going to get now into the second part, and when we come back, I'll check in and we'll have a caller. But also I want to talk to you about choosing a pistol, because I've been continuing my research on supplies and provisions, and I think that's going to be relative for you. So hang with me, y'all. I'll catch you in the virtual chat room. But first I want to talk to you about a phrase that I hear time and time again from government whistleblowers who've been talking about 2012 and Planet X over these many years. They always say you need to get your spiritual house in order. And while they understand it at an intellectual level, one thing I've noticed is that they're not able to go beyond that, because in order to get your spiritual house in order, it is not about your intellectual pursuit. It is your feelings. You have to be able to listen inside to that little voice. Well, what does that really mean? Does that mean you go to church and you sing some songs and you throw a few bucks in the basket? No. This is not to disparage religion. It gives people a lot of comfort. But the fact is, every modern religion in the world today has one thing in common. Not one has ever proven capable of surviving a global catastrophe. So then what does getting your spiritual house in order really mean? Well, in a nutshell, what it means is this is how the meek inherit the earth. And one could say that I spent a decade of research into this topic to really answer this one question. How do the meek inherit the earth? Well, in my book, Crossing the Cusp, Surviving the Edgar Casey Pole Shift, I explain to you exactly how and why the meek inherit the earth and how you can be a part of that. This knowledge is given to us by the ancient Egyptians in the Colburn Bible, the 21st Century Master Edition, in which they describe an event they call the Great Winnowing. And what the ancient Egyptians warn us is that we're going to experience fear on a level we could not imagine at present. This fear will be so great that men will become impotent and women will become infertile, and I would ask you to just think about that for a moment. It takes a lot of fear to make us incapable of reproducing. And so they tell us that the stout-hearted will not go down to destruction. So getting your spiritual house in order means, how do you become stout-hearted so that you can survive a tribulation, which will pass, and after which we could have that millennium of peace prophesied for us? Well, I've invested a great deal of time and energy over the years in answering that very question. And if you read the accounts in the Colburn, they're like man-on-the-street interviews, and sometimes it's pretty unsettling. But in my book, Crossing the Cusp, Surviving the Edgar Casey Pole Shift, I distill this down into a view that is not dependent on one particular faith or another. You could adapt it, but you will see the methodology of how you get your spiritual house in order for a global tribulation. And this, my friends, does take time, and the clock is ticking. So with that, let's move on to the interview. It's Marshall. I'm back on with Dan and Rick.
Oh, Marshall.
Hey.
This is where I really want to get to an issue that is important for me, and I will have to say that the letter that we had gotten from that lady that I had read earlier from Janet Wise was a wake-up call to me that I just needed to really start talking about. Something I've been thinking and seeing and working on for some time, but I needed to gel it to give it to the public. And one of the things that I always ask folks, and it throws them for a loop, is I say, okay, what are the 4 words that describes the sum total of Yeshua? 4 words, which is a statement, a coherent statement, is the sum total of everything he taught, believed, preached, hoped for, wanted us to achieve. Everything, which is stop thinking like slaves. To me, that's the essence of Yeshua. Now, let's put that in the context of a return of the Anunnaki. Let's apply that to present times and how we, as individuals, are going to cope with the return of the Annunaki. Who wants to step up first, guys?
Well, a couple of things.
You're a sucker for punishment. I love it.
I'll pass it to Rick real quick.
Great.
Oh, if I get in trouble. I wanted to bring out something here. You know, if a person is on the correct path to not have a slave mentality, there are things that happen differently to them, not because of their own choosing, but just because of the frequency they vibrate at. Let's put it like that. I'm going to give an example. In your discourse about the 10 plagues of Egypt and the passing of a brown dwarf, possibly, you know, that's a very, very good piece of work that you did that I have probably spent another 5 years researching on. The Hebrews lived in the swamps right outside of Egypt, the city of the Babylon, or the main area that's now called Babylon, and the Pharaoh lived in the city of Egypt there. The plagues demolished the cities. They received all of the radiation burns. They received all the iron oxide in the water that turned the water red, and all the plagues. They got them all. But the Hebrews didn't. It didn't affect their camp.
You know what they say in real estate, location, location, location.
Location, location. But they were right there with them. Now, and as we see in the Colburn, in the great book, more importantly, most of the known world suffered the same thing that the Egyptians did at that time, but the Hebrews didn't. Now, what I want to bring out there is the Hebrews were already being brought to a higher level of consciousness, okay, by a priest prince and Moses, as we know him. And the Egyptians were not. They were staying at the same level. They were subject to matter and conditions that were natural in the realm of the earth. And this brown dwarf it vibrate at the same vibrational frequency as the earth does right now. But the Hebrews weren't. I believe they were higher. They had been already started making a jump there in their vibrational frequency, and therefore they were not affected the way the Egyptians were. Now, to encourage Rick on something as I go forward here, you know, you're talking about people walking the streets that were dead. You know, that happened on another great time of darkening of the earth, when the earth was dark for 3 hours and huge earthquakes occurred.
That's right.
Whenever Yeshua died.
That's correct.
On the cross, and graves were opened, and people started walking around as they came out of the graves. And you're saying that's going to occur again during great earthquakes and darkening, and the return of perhaps the great master Yeshua on the Mount of Olives, on the east side of Jerusalem. That's where he'll set his feet down. So I think that to answer your question, Marshall, about how do we survive, part of it is responding to the spiritual growth. And I think those attributes that you were painting earlier about the lack of fear and about being able to be caring about other people and taking care of other people and being a lack of egotism and selfishness and self-centeredness, these are fruits. These are telltale signs of a spiritual growth. They aren't something that they're not. You can't imitate them. It's a result of an inner work that is resulting or that's occurring during spiritual growth. It's not something that you can just try to be and it be genuine.
Right.
So I think what you're saying is, how do we survive what is to come, well, take that step and take each step, even if it's one a day, on that spiritual path as it's been laid out for you. That's going to be different for all of us. We're all different people. I don't believe that, well, that could be so many different things to different people, but I think we need to be on a spiritual journey, and the spiritual journey needs to be a higher road than the one we're on in the world, or we're just going to go right along with the rest of the earth, just like what happened during the Exodus, where we had the 10 plagues.
Right. I think if there's enough of the right kind of people, they don't need to be the vast majority. I think that there would be enough of these people who they're going to live as an example. It's not going to be what we find in Sunday school or in churches or synagogues or whatever, which really, you look at the institutions, it's always the same thing. Don't do as I do, do as I say.
Well, look in the times of Christ. It was the religious institution that fought against Yeshua. That's right. So and that very well could be the case again. I'm not trying to point any fingers.
Well,
but
no,
the status quo is not where you want to be. We're going to have to be above the status quo.
And that's why I think earlier, Marshall, you were talking about those that have removed themselves from organized church because they're no longer getting fed there. I think I think a lot of the churches have just become irrelevant because they're run like corporations. And what does that have to do with trying to learn how to increase your spirituality? They're just two separate things. So I think people can be open to God the Father in multiple ways, in unconventional ways at that. It's whether their hearts are in that pretty much dimension. And I know that a lot of Christians also are guilty of trying to do everything. And I think that gets into a bit of arrogance to think you can go out and start saving people and giving them all of the answers when these people need to be shown inside what they need to do. It's nothing that you can say to them or try to be a used car salesman on these concepts. I think that cheapens the whole process.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, what I see is it's not even about saying what's the best way to proselytize or what's the best way to pray or whatever you're doing. It's really boils down to a very individual process. Dan, you're absolutely right. Every one of us has to go about this our own way, and we don't necessarily come to it easily. I can, for one, say I came to it officially kicking, dragging, screaming, wailing, and crying every step of the way.
You're both, brother.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I'm a born hard geek. Give me the science, just the facts, man, just the facts. And I for years didn't even want to talk about spirituality. To me, it was like, that's all woo-woo.
I mean, tying all these things in that we talked about a little bit. I mean, we started out earlier talking about all these strange noises that are emanating all over the world. I mean, the most recent YouTube, these guys are skiers up on a mountain and it's groaning up there. That's very strange. But then we've had people say that they thought, could this be one of the last trumps spoken of in Revelation? I don't think so, because there's a process involved with that. If we're taking these scriptures literally, at that point when you're talking about a trumpet sound,
very much so. Yeah.
And if not to be quoting scripture here, but just reading the passages in 1 Thessalonians of the New Testament. It says, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God." And that's when the dead start coming up out of their graves. And that is like a combination of things. But I don't think it's going to take a long time. However, I don't know. The return of the Messiah comes like as lightning flashes, the scripture says. But the process of dead coming alive maybe part of this is what I like to think of. We're reading very spiritual texts here that a lot of people, especially Christians, have read for many years. But we're also, back in the Old Testament, in the book of Joel, it talks about in the last days that God will pour out his spirit upon all flesh. Well, what does that mean exactly? I don't know. What kind of manifestations will happen? I'm beginning to think that there will be really strange supernatural events that actually have their basis in physical laws and scientific facts that we've never experienced. These are things that are actually could be explained scientifically if we knew what they were. And that gets me a little excited, because then all of a sudden it takes it out of the woo-woo realm and into the realm of reality. And that's what we like to do in the Watcher series. Go, well, what could be the cause of this? What's causing this? And what's the explanation for it? Why does ancient text talk about it? And personally, I think the Kolbrin is a great resource when you're talking about Nibiru. I mean, it's just very descriptive. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, when you read the accounts, it's man on the street. I mean, you're there.
It is.
You read this stuff, and excuse me for saying it, but you shit your pants.
Yeah.
Okay? It's that strong. I mean, it's...
Well, I like the third-party comments about Moses in the Kolbrin. I thought that was really cool. They were saying, well, but their leader was stronger than ours.
Yeah, but they sure didn't like him. They really didn't like him.
No, but
he
all
was a traitor as far as they were concerned.
Well, he was. You know, one of the things about the Kolbrin, same thing as the Bible, is that the name of the Pharaoh of Exodus is not given. And anybody who says they know is guesstimating. But nowhere in any of the historical records that are available is the actual name of the Pharaoh of Exodus mentioned.
Perhaps out of respect.
I think out of respect. I think that there was a tacit agreement between Moses and his Egyptian family that they'd keep the name out of it. Guys, when we come back for the third and final segment, let's take a laser focus on this, because, like I said, it's this demographic group I'm focusing on. Spiritual thinkers in general is the larger demographic group. The people who have that strength to endure that with their humanity and their compassion in service to others are the ones that are going to shape the world. But they're also going to be the ones who are going to be our frontline defense in dealing with races that want to exploit us and keep us in slavery. So when we come back for the third segment, let's get right down to it in Anunnaki versus spiritual Christian thinkers.
Yeah, hey, man, we're on a roll now. This is a fun interview. You guys in the virtual chat room, wow, I'm really enjoying the conversations there. You guys are jumping in, and yeah, hey, glad you're enjoying the show. Now I want to just on a more mundane thing, but talk about my update on selecting a personal defense weapon for getting through these times. Now, everybody's got favorites, all right? I'll tell you personally that if money was no object, yours truly would get himself a Smith & Wesson 945 Custom. Oh, baby. I just love that thing. Yeah. But on a more practical side, it's bloody expensive. It's out of the budget. It's a competition shooting pistol. And I do like the 1911 design, classic, time-proven. It's excellent. But it's also a more difficult weapon for women to handle in general. And when I'm looking at what you need for a personal defense issue, a lot of the reasons you would buy a handgun today are not going to apply necessarily to dealing in a tribulation circumstance. And here's some of the issues you need to keep in mind. One is you need to have a weapon that's simple enough to operate that folks that are really not super competent can pick them up and intuitively just use them. I'm talking about revolver simple. Aim, pull the trigger, that's it. All right? Simplicity goes a long way. The second thing is you need to be able to have a good caliber to do it. Now, a lot of folks, go out and they get 9mm and 38s. Well, 9mm and 38s are fine for killing human beings. But as a catastrophism researcher, I think what concerns me more is not crazy people. You'll have to deal with crazy people. It's going to be animals. And here's why. We're going to, in my book, Crossing the Cusp, all right, Surviving the Edgar Cayce Pole Shift, I show how the Avebury 2008 formation tells us very clearly at the end of this year, there's going to be the mother of all solar storms going to hit us. It is going to tear us a new ta-ta, folks. I mean, it's going to be ugly. You're going to have to go to ground. You're going to need to get some dirt and concrete and steel over your head. And that's a fact, all right? And afterwards, we're going to have two things we have to deal with. One, the Earth is going to take a huge wallop of energy. And like a steam kettle that you turn up the heat, it's going to result in volcanism and seismicity. And so we're going to see some really nasty earthquakes and volcanoes popping up after that heat gets the Earth going. But at the same time, we're going to, and bear in mind, the magnetosphere of the planet is weakening, and it has deformed dramatically. I think that is really, you know, I can remember when I first started doing this back in 1999, and the pictures of the magnetosphere were just so nice. You know, there was this nice big shield in front of the Earth and, you know, going about a third of the way to the moon behind us, nice and straight along the ecliptic. Well, now it's canted off of the ecliptic, and the tail of the magnetosphere is bending down. It really looks like it's just being pulled around by something else. Guess what? All right. On top of that, gosh, you know, it just seems we can't do enough to destroy the natural defense of our own atmosphere. And so ozone holes and so forth, you know, we've weakened our own defenses. The planet's magnetosphere is weakening. And so what this means is we are many more times susceptible to space weather in the coming days than we've ever been before. Now, when these solar storms hit, we're all going to be in the ground. You're going to be somewhere where you've got concrete, steel, and dirt over your head. So a lot of us are going to be in basements. We're going to be in parking garages, wherever we can get out of the sun, because it's going to be just a rip tear ass. All right. To get a good idea of just the absolute worst case scenario of it, go get that movie Knowing with Nicolas Cage and just go right to the end of it. It's like that one scene where the solar storm just rips the surface right off the planet. But all of a sudden then, if you see that in Knowing, all right, and I think more likely, it's not that end scene. It's the scene where you see the animals on fire and running everywhere. They don't know if trees are burning. Everything's getting torched because of the solar storming. I think we're going to see that. And that means you're going to have animals. They're going to be dehydrated, starved, burned, injured, crazy with fear. And this is when you do not want to be defenseless. You're going to have to put these animals down before they do damage to you, because you're going to have water that they can't find, and they'll smell that water, okay? We don't smell water, animals can. So you need something that's going to take down an animal. Now, obviously, the first thing you want to do is have something, you want to get them as far away from you as possible. You get yourself an old bolt-action 30 caliber military rifle, a Mosin Nagant or a Mauser. They're cheap. You can go get them at the, you know, the stores, and just for a couple $100 or less, you can buy plenty of surplus ammunition. And the thing about any of these military calibers in the 30 caliber range, they'll take down an animal, all right? And that'll be just fine for that purpose. You got a nice big hunting rifle, you know, sure, that's great. How many of us can go out and afford to spend, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 on a nice new Weatherby, all right? Here, you just need something to take them down. But what happens if they get closer than that, all right? Well, after looking at all the handgun ammunition that's out there, and that's really, before you buy a handgun, you first decide what caliber of ammunition you're going to use. That is the tail that wags the dog, as far as it goes for survival. And that caliber, as far as I'm concerned, is only one caliber. It starts with 4 and it ends with 5, 45 ACP. Or you can get a 45 revolver. They've got other sizes, but 45 ACP I like because it's got the knockdown power, and there's a lot of that ammunition around. And so that makes it very useful. You want a 45 that's going to have the knockdown power. And to give you an idea of how that came about, the 1911 design was something that came out of when we were fighting in the Philippines back, I think, in 1906. And this is when Pershing was over there. And the problem that they had was that the officers were all carrying 38 caliber revolvers. And what the fighters, these were all Muslims that were fighting, that they were up against. And what they would do was, they didn't have the fancy armor. They would wrap themselves in linen, bind themselves so tightly that, you know, almost to the point where it's hard to breathe. Then they would get just stoned
just completely doped up. And they had a very special suicide rule. They would get in close enough on an ambush, and then they would go straight for the officer. And unless that officer could get a vital organ kill shot in the head, in the brain, or in the heart, they could shoot him in the torso as many times as they wanted. And, you know, because the bodies were bound up, and due to the caliber of the 38 and the way it performs, it would just pass right through, and it wouldn't stop them. They would be dying, yes, but they didn't feel it, and it didn't slow them down. And consequently, Army officers were getting hacked to death in great numbers. In fact, there's never been any military campaign conducted by the United States Army where there was such a disproportionate number of field officers being killed in the line of action as there were at that time. So what happened afterwards is the Army realized it's a whole new world. They needed a bigger caliber for the weapon and for the defense of the officers. And when they specified for a new pistol, they said, I mean, it wasn't politically correct to say we need you to go shoot a terrorist that's or a freedom fighter, however you want to look at it, who's wrapped up and doped up and is not going to get slowed down in the least bit unless you get a lucky shot with a 38. It was just easier to say we need a caliber handgun that will kill a horse. And the caliber that met that was the 45 ACP. And that thing, if it hits you, it will stop you. Maybe it kills you, maybe it doesn't, but it's going to rain on your parade, it's going to slow you down. And the thing about a 45 automatic is that you not only have that knockdown power, but you have the ability to put several rounds into the animal, whatever's coming at you. And that's important, you know, more than double tap. I mean, you're going to have to hit an animal and keep hitting them and keep hitting them to slow them down because, again, remember, they're going to be starved, burned terribly beyond recognition, half blind, crazy with fear, parched. The animals are not going to be doing well. And I know this sounds awful, but this is what you have to think about. Now, looking at 45s, yes, I've always been a 1911 man. But in reviewing that, I have come to really the conclusion that for the purpose of surviving a global catastrophe, the weapon of choice is a Glock. Personally, I think the Glock is the ugliest thing ever made. I think it fell out of the ugly tree and hit every frickin' branch on the way down. It's just, you set it next to a 1911 and it's like comparing a Lamborghini to a freight car. But that aside, you know, you look at law enforcement, they love Glocks. Reliable as all get out, a little bit lighter than 1911, and it puts a lot downrange. And it's a very affordably priced. You get a lot of weapon for the money. I think that's one real advantage. I like the trigger system. It's literally pistol simple. It's a double action. You just take it out if you got a round chambered, and that's, you can do that. Just simply pull it out, point it, and pull the trigger. Boom. Just as easy to use as a revolver, which means women and kids, if necessary, that would need to pick up that weapon in defense of you and anyone else in your group is going to be able to do that. With a 1911, man, that's a different ball of wax. There's more to understand and to be familiar with. Another advantage is that it has got a high-capacity magazine. Now, the model that I like is the Model 21. It is the 45. It is the full-size handgun. There's smaller 45s. Whether you want to get the full-size frame or the smaller frame, you know, that depends on what feels good in your hand. You know, this is something to remember. You're going to need it in a time of crisis. One thing you can do with a Glock that I found is a real advantage is aftermarket parts. Now, you can lighten the trigger pull. That's important. A lighter trigger pull, like a Glock comes with a 6-pound pull, you can get parts that aftermarket parts that'll take it from a 6 to 7-pound pull to a 3 to 4-pound pull. What that does is it keeps you on target. If you got an animal coming at you, all right, you don't want the recoil knocking the pistol up so that you've got to bring it back down and aim it again. You know, you want to be able to keep it on target. And you can do that. There's also aftermarket parts that recoil buffers and other things. Recoil management is really important. Here's where the Glock is good in terms of aftermarket, because it's so consistent that you can go to a number of different sources and it's all going to work. With 1911, one thing I do find with aftermarket parts is it doesn't matter if the manufacturer says it is a true 1911. You know, a lot of them, it just doesn't work well that way. You're going to have problems with it. Now also remember, in a catastrophic situation, you're not going to be able to find a gunsmith. So you want something that's really proven, reliable, solid. Now, for those of you that can, if you're buying a Glock, there's the Generation 3 and then there's the Generation 4. And I would recommend you look at both. Generation 4 has one really good advantage, is that it's ambidextrous. You can do it for both hands. And there are states that will not allow that to come in, like California, because they don't want somebody getting two-fisted with their Glocks, and next thing you know, with 13-round high-capacity magazines, they're putting a lot of lead downrange. But, you know, in California and other states, they'll have caps. You can only have 10 rounds in the magazine. Realistically, folks, you know, you're going to have, if you have an animal charging at you, maybe enough time to get off 3, 4, 5 rounds. If it's a revolver, maybe 1 or 2, 3 at the most. So that's the point there. And one last advantage I like on the Glocks is they're called a dry gun. And unlike other pistols, they require much less oiling. As a matter of fact, it's recommended that you do that. So you can use them. They're very easy to clean, disassemble, take apart. And you could have just like a little tube of gun butter oil or something like that. That'll last you through the whole tribulation and beyond. So there you go. For getting through it, if you haven't got yourself a sidearm for the family, go take a look at the Glock 21 Generation 3 or Generation 4. Go look at the other ones. But after everything, I have to say I went to that way, and you're talking to a man who is lock, stock, and barrel a Colt 1911 boy. Now, with that, let's get into segment 3 of the show, and we're enjoying it. We'll move on to the interview in just a moment, but first I want to talk about 2 words that you really need to know and understand. One is perception, and the other is awareness. These 2 words describe essentially the same thing, but from very different points of view. Perceptive is a material view of what is coming in the days ahead and how to survive it. Awareness is a spiritual term for what is coming in the days ahead and how to survive it as well. The difference is between service to self and service to others. Perception is the benchmark that the elites use. The dog-eat-dog logic is, if you are as smart as them, that you can perceive what is going to happen in the future, then maybe you earn a right to do something about it, build your own bunker. Not necessarily that they're going to give you a golden Wonka ticket to their own bunkers, but rather it's the mechanism that they use to justify the way that they are suppressing this vital knowledge for the majority of humanity. Because the simple point of it is that once oil infrastructure is destroyed on the planet through various different natural disasters, it doesn't matter how much oil we can pump out of the ground. If you cannot move it and refine it and dispense it, it's just nothing but useless black goo. Which means the petrochemical-based fertilizers and insecticides that have created the ability for us to produce 2 to 3 times as much food as we normally would through purely organic means is going away. At that point, we're going to have a lot of hungry people chasing after a few scraps and morsels. And so while the elites are down in their bunkers knowing that people are starving to death and doing horrible things because of it above ground, they'll be confident in their righteous decision to say, if you're not smart enough to perceive it, that's what you deserve. But if you are like myself, a light worker or a life worker, and you are in a service to others mode, the term is not perception, it is awareness. And awareness comes to each and every one of us in its own way and its own time. And when you are in service to others, you help those who do come into awareness and seek your knowledge. And when that day comes, You're going to be busy with your own survival, and you'll help them as best as you can. But a real head start is to be able to say, here, read Planet X Forecast and 2012 Survival Guide, or Crossing the Cusp, Surviving the Edgar Casey Pole Shift. These 2 books are going to help you bring others into awareness because you can cover a lot more ground with a lot more people, more effectively, and very quickly with these tools. It's a principal reason why I wrote the books. And with that, let's move on to our interview. I'm back with Dan and Rick. And guys,
Hello, Marshall.
the question here is, as a researcher, what I have really seen is that the most capable demographic slice of our society are going to be spiritual thinkers from any belief system you want, whether they're Christian, Jew, Muslim, I don't care. Because they're going to be in service to others, their hearts are going to be free of malice and ego, and are really getting the essence of what Yeshua is teaching, which is we need to stop thinking like slaves, because if we don't do that, the Anunnaki are going to kick our little asses, and I don't want to see that happen. I'm banking on spiritual Christian thinkers like you 2 guys to see that doesn't happen, because you've got the numbers. So talk to your own kind, both of you.
Well, I wanted to kind of say here, point out that it's not just the Christians that I've discovered are thinking this way, but several of my Jewish friends, as you know, I've been working on the Torah Code project, it seems like endlessly, and tremendous insight coming from the rabbis that I'm associating with and some of the professors. I've already gotten 2 emails from Professor Haralick just while we have been on this show with you. We're watching things forming in Iran right now, and it's almost just like ancient prophetic texts are just unfolding in front of our eyes. We're all just kind of dumbfounded by it because it's all happening just the way it says it would. And your comment, Marshall, about the who survives and who doesn't, and what's going to happen to the earth. There's so many ancient prophetic texts that talk about the time that we're in now. The Old Testament is rife with examples, as well as the Hopis, as we study what they're learning. They've already are waiting for the sun to get really hot. In the Old Testament, in the book of Malachi, chapter 4, it says that all the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble. It will burn like a furnace. Not a root or a branch will be left to them. But then he's talking about the Jews. But for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness. Now, he's not talking about the Son of God here. He's talking about the Son, because it's spelled S-U-N. The Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings. So there's a section in Watchers 3 where we interviewed Rabbi Glazerson, who talked about that some people will be healed by this light and other people will disappear by it. It's very interesting to me, theory that he has like that. But then going back to what Dan said earlier today, that it seemed like the Hebrews were given some kind of special knowledge early on. Yeah, I agree. When you really go back and you study all this stuff, and now that I've had the benefit of kind of sitting under some of these men as we go through some very bizarre things.
Yeah.
I mean, like I mentioned last time, the ephod, which was the breastplate that the high priest wore.
Right.
Most people don't know that the high priest could ask questions. Should we go to battle? Should we do this? Should we do that? And the stones on it would actually illuminate with an answer. That's very bizarre stuff.
There you go.
So when we put that into the Torah codes, we found out that when we put the word Torah code, that phrase, into the Torah code computer, and the word ephod, E-P-H-O-D, which is that breastplate thing, we got like 4 or 5 ephods surrounding the word Torah code when it came up in the code.
Wow.
And it's like, that's more than just chance. I mean, that's really more than just random chance.
No, I mean, we're talking about an ancient Hebrew iPad.
Exactly. This is a
Yeah, right.
324-year-old text.
Yeah. I mean, this is part and parcel of this amazing stuff, and
very amazing. So then we all have to ask ourselves: is the Torah code the modern ephod? Are we supposed to ask the Torah code questions about the times in which we live? I think so. I mean, this is something anybody can access. It's open to the rest of the world now. Not just the high priest can do it. Anybody that can read Hebrew can get the software and do it themselves.
That's right. You know, I mean, it's in the Old Testament. It's the first 5 books, and that's the source material. So as a Christian, you don't have to worry about being extra biblical because your source document is something that has withstood this test of time. And I think your point is well taken. I'm seeing this general awakening. I'm seeing with folks from many, many different walks of life, and I'm deeply grateful to see all of them. But as a researcher, I'm looking at the demographics. I'm finding that the Christian audience has shifted. I used to have a lot of people that were just simply looking for rapture indications, whether they were in pre-rapture mode or, you know, forget it. I mean, I don't even get into a conversation because that polarizes and that's it.
Too many rapturists.
Too many rapturists, yeah. So, I mean, that's what I called them, was the rapturists.
Yeah. And then it gets into big arguments. Are you a pre-tribulationist or a mid-tribulationist?
Or a pre-wrath or a post-millennial. Yeah, there's so many different ones, you're right.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it just kind of, it's like, whoa, that's a confusing conversation. But still the same, though. As a single large demographic block, all right, the Christian spiritual thinkers that I have seen as a share of my audience grow dramatically, especially in the last 2 years. These are people that are really kind of falling in between the cracks on both sides, because what I see is, on one hand, you know, we got the guys that are going to Sedona, Arizona, and 2012 is light and love and wonderful. And we're all going to wake up on December 21, 2012 and singing, I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company, or something like that. And it's like, I'm going, you know, excuse me, guys, you're a little out of touch here.
I may have a camera on you, Marshall. I want to see what you do. I may have a camera on you that day.
Webcam me. Now, statistically speaking, as they say, the rat and the snake are the spiritual Christians. And so how do they find that harmonious balance of science and faith so that they can deal with earth changes, return of Annunaki? It doesn't matter. They're the folks that just keep on coming. Talk to that.
Well, I have, I'd like to approach it a little differently. I mean, studying is obviously good, but there's a work that has to occur in any person that's on a spiritual journey, and science is one of the things they should be studying along, because spiritualism is a science in itself. It's metaphysics. Much of it is metaphysics.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I want to approach this a little different. I have a saying that says, no great sword of battle is tempered by the hottest of fires. And I think that's going to be very applicable for what we're talking about here, of who's going to survive and how they're going to survive. And I want to just send my heart out to the people that are going through hardships right now, that are actually on a journey, because it's designed to go. We are designed to go through hardship, because that's how we learn. Even in the Colburn Bible, the Egyptians recognize that the humans require hardship to learn great character. And I think there's a great book called Hind's Feet in High Places by Hannah Hurnard, and it describes how in our life we can take sorrow and suffering, and that can be from anything. It can be from loss of job, it can be from loss of a limb of a loved one, it can be from suffering from a malady or a sickness or anything. We have to do this in order to be tempered by the fire of trial, in order to be hardened for the day of battle. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think that people out there that are on a spiritual journey go through hardship in life, and they don't understand why, but they become much stronger by going through it. And it's going to be the people that know how to turn sorrow and suffering into joy and love that are the ones that are going to conquer. If you look in texts of all over the world, joy is a strength to people. Love is a conquering emotion, or a conquering spiritual attribute of people. It's not hate, although they may temporarily win a battle, and it's not being down on yourself or being depressed. That doesn't overcome. What overcomes is joy and love. I think that those are the two resulting character qualities in people who have gone through suffering and sorrow. And so we find that people on spiritual journeys find themselves having to go through hard ordeals. And I'll even talk about having to relive, your past bad things that happened to you in order to heal. Because I don't know, it's said that to heal is hurts worse than it does than the original wound.
Oh God, boy, did you hit that one on the nail?
And it is, and we're creatures of pleasure, so we don't want to go back and relive or heal from these wounds because it's painful. Nonetheless, we have to go through these things in order to develop the tempering, the temperance, the hardening that is required with an open heart, not a hardened heart, but an open heart of love and joy. Mm-hmm. That will be the power by which we overcome. The Anunnaki want to demoralize. That's why fear really demoralizes. Lack of control, exercising abusive authority, all these things demoralize a people, and they rob joy and they rob love. It is said, as Rick was saying earlier in some text, that in the end times that love will grow cold, but you shall know them by their love. So that is how we're going to know who's going to overcome, is by their character. And I just want to encourage people, if they keep cursing sorrow and suffering and the hardship they go through in life, turn it around. Turn it around and use that as the very fire to make you a greater person than you already are, because that's what it's there for. Truly it is.
You know, that's an excellent point. I've got another interview that I was looking at, and I was doing a commentary and talking to folks that are really feeling the pinch of what's happening. Because, as we mentioned in the first interview, we got a Congress that the only thing it can agree on, Republicans and Democrats alike, is how to dismantle our Constitution. And they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. They are.
It's accelerating.
Yeah, so I am seeing that. But I'm seeing people losing their homes, losing everything. All right? Folks that have worked hard, played by the rules, and, they're just left holding the bag. And worse yet, they're being told, well, it's because you're stupid. You're not as smart and as clever as we are. But on the other hand, I look at people being in preparation and planning for 2012 and beyond. And there was a fellow on TV, he said, you can jump off of an 80-story building and for the first 79 floors, you really think you're flying.
Yeah.
And
okay.
It's that last floor that really gets you. And I think the point here is that people that are losing everything now, they're losing their homes, they're losing their health care, they're losing everything that was holding their lives together, and they're having to be resourceful and to pull through it. They're in the process of falling that 79 floors already. So when the worst of it really hits, they've got a very short distance to fall, which means they can land on their feet, and they're running. But for everybody else that right now, particularly the ones that are mocking and humiliating them and telling them to shut up, they got a full 87-story fall before they get to that first floor. And when events are imminent, where do you want to be? At the 80th floor or down around the first? And I think your point is, if you view your predicament in life, find your fortune in that you're going to be more adaptable. You're going to be able to hit the ground running much better than what you thought.
Right. That's right. Exactly right. And I go back to the saying, no great sword of battle is tempered but by the hottest of fires. So the greater you wish to be in battle, the harder you're going to be tried. Mm-hmm. Just know it.
Just know it.
And I encourage every one of them, you three, both of you and all of my other friends and everyone else out there, that to the level that you ask to be used as a sword in battle against the Annunaki, to the same degree will you be taken through a tempering fire in life. And that means hardship. That's how we humans are tempered. It's also how we become self-sufficient, by the way. Losing your job isn't necessarily a bad thing, because all of a sudden you start exercising all this creativity that you haven't been using about how on earth can I make ends meet and get food and get fire, heat my home with wood now, and I'm going to have to go grow some food or, some different things that are non-dependent upon the government, interestingly enough. These new creative ideas don't depend upon the government or an Anunnaki to take care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those things I think are great. I think what some of us are more concerned about is martial law, because then they could come into your home and take you away, and then you don't really have a chance to grow food or anything else.
Yeah.
So that's something
that's a different story, though. It's a different one. How do you prepare for that?
But still the same. Think about it. All right, Nelson Mandela, They jailed him, but they didn't jail his spirit. And whichever side of the story you're on, you have to admit he endured and held on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it also reminds me of that movie, Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
Yeah, he puts on the record with the lady singing.
Yeah.
All right. And after he comes out of his 30 days in the hole, and he said, you know, hey, the music's in the mind. They can't take that away from you.
Right.
I guess that is a parallel here to what you guys are saying.
Yeah. It's a great film, and it's really true.
So, real quick shot, each of you guys, talk to spiritual thinking Christians, and if there's that one or two or three things real fast that they can start doing today, that's going to give them the strength to deal whatever comes, with whatever comes, whether it's Anunnaki and its earth changes and its disasters and its suffering and it's rebuilding the world, it doesn't matter. All of it is one huge soup. The question is how do they ladle that soup? And so, first off, to you, Rick.
I think it would be good to be praying for the connections that you need to help direct you out of the situation and into where you need to be. Very strange thing happened today because I got a call about Watchers 4 that we're currently getting information on, and we're doing a near-death experience section in Watchers 4.
Mm.
And I've discovered that there was a show, you know, on biography about that I think I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the guys in there had died and gone to hell. And it was such an interesting thing because this was a black guy named Tyrone.
Mm-hmm.
And we had already planned on interviewing a Caucasian man, Howard Storms, who's out in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And they both had the same experience.
Wow.
And so I started looking up Tyrone because I felt like I was kind of led to this show. And I found him all over YouTube. And they have an organization to help kids in the black community to get them on the right path again. And I found his phone number, so I called it, and Tyrone answers. So we had this wonderful conversation, and I said, I would love to interview you for Watchers 4. And he said, well, I'm up in Sacramento, but I have to go to San Diego, and I could come through Hollywood. So, I mean, here he's like coming to me.
Right.
And those things just don't happen by chance. Those things happen because they're put in place, and you just fall into the right moment. But I believe God does those things.
I agree. It happens to me all the time.
There was that movie, The Secret, that came out, and while I don't adhere to all of the things they taught in there, they do talk about something called the law of attraction. And sometimes I think it maybe happens a little bit like that. If you want to use that as a scientific explanation of faith, you could. But I just thought that was a remarkable thing that happened this morning. And then also, I think that God can get to you through your thoughts and your dreams. Because the other night, I had this dream, I think it was the 18th of January, that I was in this department store, and I was looking out through the window, and there was the sun out there, and there was kind of a haze over it, so I remembered I could look straight at it and see the disk of the sun quite clearly in my dream, and then all of a sudden, some strange black waves went through it, almost like, Marshall, like you see on the Soho spacecraft when you're looking at the electromagnetic waves that go across the sun sometimes.
Right.
It was doing that. Then all of a sudden it went boom, and all these like liquidish fire things, very strange looking CME burst, came out of the sun, and I went back into the store in my dream and said, hey guys, it's not going to be long until that's going to hit us. And then I woke up. Well, then the next day that actually happened. So my dream happened the day before the big solar CME, and so I was kind of like, couldn't believe it when I went on to Soho, and they said, well, we're going to be hit with this wave, this solar wave on the 21st, which was yesterday. And so I'm thinking, well, I don't know. I can't explain why I dreamed about it the day before it happened.
But it's that inner voice, and I think that's a good point for you to pick up on, Dan, is developing your ability to really hear and connect with your inner voice, because there you get the knowledge and the insights, the intuition that you need to make good decisions. Not guidance that says here's what you must do, but it's where you get the knowledge that, frankly, gives you options. at which point you're free to choose wisely or not.
I agree with you. I think first, we need to make sure that we're on a spiritual journey, however we choose to do that. We need to be on a spiritual journey. You can't guide a rocket if it's not moving. So you need to be on a spiritual journey. And secondly, just to let you know, intuition or spiritual communication is a native attribute of our spirit. We have that ability, but it's been dulled because we've been taught by the world system that we don't have the we don't have the ability to do that. That's silly. That's, science can't see that. We can't measure that. So we've been taught that it's not true, but we have that ability innately. Depending upon your spiritual journey, you have guides, you have mentors, you have angels, you have God that can teach you. There are many voices out there. I'm warned that there are some voices that will lead you astray, and there are voices that will lead you on the right path. So make sure and govern what voices you're listening to and challenge them. Make sure that they are following a correct course. But they will.
That's exactly right.
They can provide a lot of mentoring and bring about the events in your life that you're looking for that you don't even know. And I can't begin to tell you the number of times in my life that I'm asking one question and the answer comes very inadvertently and in a way that I have no clue why it came that way, but that's exactly how I got my answer. It's exactly what I was asking for. But ask the question. Whatever your questions are, ask them silently, and do so continually. Just be about that question, and the answer will come. Where there are no questions, there are no answers. It's a very simple fact. So ask the questions and be about that question, and they will come. The answers will come.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, what you need to start doing first is resolve that you're going to do it. And you just say to God, I am ready for a teacher, someone to help me take this next step. And as Dan said, you just keep asking, because as the old Chinese proverb says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And that is exactly how it works. And from there, you will find yourself entering into a world of love and of light, and that joy and that hope will pull you through the worst of it. Final thoughts, Rick?
Well, I agree with what you just said. I mean, it kind of goes with what I was saying, that you'll be guided and directed to the people that you need to know. And that's important. No one is an island. You can't do everything on your own. You're going to require help. There is a wave of bad things coming that I think we're going to have to go through, and then after that, it should get really interesting.
That's it. I agree. Dan?
Well, I think that it's actually a joyous look at the future of these events that are going to occur because of the evolution that's going to occur, the jump in our spiritual awakening and our spiritual evolution. So I'm looking at it as a joy. Yes, there's going to be hardship, but it's going to be a joy. It's going to be great.
I agree with that.
And after it's all done, then it's going to be an end to all the crap that we've been suffered through.
And we get to discover who we've become. It's going to be a whole new, wonderful world of discovering who we've become.
Guys, you've just given me a good reason to endure the hardships to come. Thank you so much.
You bet. Good talking to you, Marshall.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, hey there, folks. That was just a great show with these fellas, and I think we covered a lot of ground. And I'm going to continue on with doing this. This year, I'm really going to be focusing a lot on the ET angle, and because I do believe that we are coming into a time when we're going to make contact on a large scale. I did want to respond to, there was a question here in the virtual chat room by STOXX. Are there some places on the planet it would be better to pick up and move to for a better chance, or is the abuse of power assault going to be everywhere? All right, that's a two-part question. The first part, are there some places on the planet better to move to? Well, realistically, folks, we live where we live, we work where we work, our kids go to school, you got to make do. I think that in general, if you're going to go to a bunker, you're going to have a survive and play strategy. Now, you want to be inland. You have to do a lot of site reconnaissance. You really need to figure out how you're going to get to it and how you're going to get there. Look at the Denver airport. That's what the elites have got for their hub, so that when the guacamole hits the fan, they can fly into that airport and disappear into that deep underground base built below it and the entrances to other bases. On the other hand, if you are going to take a survival on the move strategy, And personally, I lean more in that direction because once we get past the heavy solar storms, people that can live on the move are going to do much better. And this brings us to the second part, the abuse of power. If you're out in the boonies, you're going to be in a neck of the woods where the elites are they're just not going to have the resources to get at you. I mean, they are going to have to use their resources for large, dense population areas. You scattered to the wind. Tracking you down is just a lot of trouble. And if you're not making grief for them, what's the incentive? So you want to be able to fade away. That's an important thing. Then I wanted to real quickly talk about the Earth trumpets. I've been following this. I'm really interested in these Earth trumpet reports. And I received an email from one of the authors, Sophie Rose, had her on before. And she was kind of curious too, and she passed something along to me that was sent to her, and I'll read it for you. It says, "This is the information given out by an individual who channels the casual plane entity known as Michael." Casual plane entity? That immediately my ears pick up on that New Age stuff. It's got the woo-woo factor going for it. "These sounds," and I'm reading now, quote, quote, "these sounds are an aural bleed-through from traffic on the spiritual grid that so many of you have been building. This will happen more and more often as the grid evolves, especially around areas of great traffic. You are also hearing some whale song as a bit of seraphim." I'm looking at this and I'm going, is this short enough that you could tweet it? Because it just seems like a social post to me. Frankly, folks, I don't know what the Earth trumpets are, but in my gut, I have to say the feeling is Earth is crying. If for those that are parents and you have infants, you go out and you get those little monitors for your child. So when they're sleeping, you have one in the kitchen or the bedroom, wherever you're at, and when the child starts to cry, you got to get up and take care of things. And I think the Earth trumpets, to my way of thinking, and I can't say, I don't know the absolute answer, but to my way of thinking, it's like the baby monitor that says, "Get off your ass, the kid's hurting." Now, looking forward to next week, we are going to have a real interesting show. I'm going to have Rabbi Glazerson on. He's with the Torah Code Project, and that's the one that Richard Shaw is developing and doing a fabulous job. And Torah Code is, I think it doesn't get enough credit, frankly. I think it tends to get undersold because one of the things we found was there was one Torah Code table on Comet Elenin that's literally, to me as a researcher, said, "Hey, this thing's going to get slammed by a CME and disintegrate." Well, that's what happened. And we had that code long before that event actually happened. And we're going to get into, in the next interview with Rabbi Glazerson, a way to get inside the project. Not the usual chest beating, this is what it's all about, and all the historical stuff. I'm doing what I do best, born hard geek. I want to get in there and find out who are the principals, what's the process, how are they doing this, and it's driven that way. But we also have an interesting note about Obama in that, so you want to stay tuned. And another reason to tune in for that is that show will be airing on Valentine's Day. This second part of the return of the Anunnaki, we're really focusing on what we can do as individuals. Because, well, to be frank, what the elites want us to do is to make us feel that we are impotent and incapable of doing any damn dull thing until they tell us what to do. And then if we don't like it, well, we got to lump it. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think you should subscribe to that. I think what we have to do is just say, hey, this is my planet too, and I have a right to know. And you do not have a right to subjugate me and to make me your slave. And I think humanity is going to do that. In the study of catastrophism, what is catastrophism? It's long periods of quiescence, hills and valleys, so to speak, which are then interrupted by punctuated moments of incredible violence that is going to completely remap the order of life on the planet. All right. And when that happens, folks are going to start looking for real answers. Now, the old question, where's the beef? And we're going to have a profound moment that will change us through this and also change our view of institutions. You know, if you look at what really started the Renaissance, and I discuss this at length in my book, Crossing the Cusp, and that is the plagues that swept through Europe. Devastating, devastating plagues. And people were turning to the church and saying, you know, you guys got this direct connection with God. You're supposed to be able to see this coming and deal with it and get it removed or mitigated. And the church was completely impotent and powerless to do anything. And so in a period of quiescence, where you don't have these catastrophic events or massive plagues sweeping through a continent, these institutions can do whatever they want to do. But when the going gets rough, the corrupt get going away, and they fade away. And that's what's going to happen here. And so for each of us, we need to think about that day when all of these institutions that are ramrodding things, and frankly, many of them are intentionally confusing and muddling our minds because it serves their financial interests and their power interests to do so, are not going to be able to do that. They're going to be obvious for what they are. They're going to fail for what they are. And then we're going to have to decide, how do we start over? In this program, I'm going to be talking to you with these guests about the people I think are going to do that, which I have identified as spiritual thinkers. You've heard me discuss this before, and so I won't belabor the point. We also cover it in the interview. But in this segment of spiritual thinkers, the largest statistical portion of this body of people, which I view as the most important population of human beings for our species in that time when we have gotten through the worst of the tribulation, what I call the backside, when things are starting to calm down and the world is going back to green and blue. And it will. It will be beautiful once again. And these are the folks that are going to be the ones that decide the outcome of where humanity is going. And this is as it should be. This is the intention, I believe, of Creator. It is our right. It is our destiny. But just as it is our right, it is also our right to lose it. And that comes down to you as an individual. You're not pointing the finger at somebody else. You start by pointing the finger at yourself. You have to be a leader. And the first thing you have to do is be a leader of one and a majority of one. And so with that, let's get into it. And later on in the show, I want to talk about picking a good pistol for survival if you haven't done one already. I've been updating my research on that, and I'll be sharing that with you. But for now, let's get into it with Dan Dean and Richard Shaw. Shaw of Pinlight Productions in Hollywood and Dan Dean. And the best way for me to start this is with an email that I received from someone who's been following my work. Her name's Janet Weiss, and she lives out in Hawaii. And here's her comments. Marshall Masters, I have met and studied with Sitchin since the mid-1990s. He'd roll over in his grave if I did not respond to your Planet X theory. You failed to mention the whole thesis of his work, the Anunnaki race which occupies Nibiru. One needs to read more than his first 12th planet book to understand what the Sumerian texts relate. The theory you have about two suns, I also lived at Mount Shasta at the Monastery of the Seven Rays, the Temple of Sanada and Sanat Kumara, in the teachings written down by Sister Thedra called the Scripts. She speaks about the day when we will look up and see two suns. You are the first person I have heard speak about that since 1973, when I started studying the Ascended Master's teachings at Mount Shasta. All right? And the rest of it, she goes on, kind of a personal thing to me. And she reads the Colburn Bible, and she's looking forward to an answer. And, you know, she's right. I have really not taken the issue of the Anunnaki head on. I think, to me, it was always something that Sitchin does such an incredible job of it. I didn't see any need to be a Me Too fella. But now we are looking at this. And what I really want to explore, guys, is we're talking about all these things, and we're always saying, what are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? In this interview, guys, we got to start talking about what can we do, because there's a lot we can. All right? And with that, I'm going to throw it first to you, Dan.
Well, that's a big question, buddy. There's a lot we can. I think we ought to categorize, taking in light of what Rick was talking about, the evolution of a spiritual race. And we're not talking about a physical body. We're talking, yes, physical evolution occurs, but we're talking about a spiritual race here. Mm-hmm. We're at a point where we have the opportunity to evolve. Mm-hmm. Anytime you're on a fence, and the human race, as it is written in the Colburn, they have to be forced off the fence to either evolve or devolve.
Boy, we're getting forced, aren't we, Rick?
Okay. Yeah. So let's try to categorize who the people are going to be, the humans are going to be. Mm-hmm. First, we're going to have, and it doesn't matter whether you're in an underground bunker or if you are a shaman in the top of a tree in Africa or a regular citizen in a suburbia of America. It doesn't matter. I think we will fall into one of these four categories. Either we're going to be evolving and jumping to the next dimension, or we will be devolving because we failed to learn what we needed to learn in this incarnation.
That's interesting.
So if we screw the pooch, we're going to be back to Knuckle Dragon.
Or we have to learn it again, okay? And then there's those who will die during the entire situation, and they will have to face some sort of a guide or a judgment or something later, as a spiritual being, but it's not going to be a physical process that occurs while they're alive.
What do you think?
I think that first we should try to categorize those people that are here and where they might end up. Mm-hmm. Because there's multiple people, and I don't think, and I'm referring to a spiritual being here, not a spiritual evolution, mm-hmm. not a physical evolution. We know that, physical evolution occurs, but we're talking about very old spirits here that are incarnate. Mm-hmm. So I think that they're, like Rick was saying earlier, that we have an opportunity to evolve. So there's going to be those spirits that evolve. Mm-hmm. There's going to be those spirits that devolve while they're incarnate. Mm-hmm. Then there's going to be those who die in the process. And they may go through an evolution or de-evolution also in their spirit form. And then there's those who I'm not sure if there's going to be someone who remain. There's this thing that plagues us that says the meek shall inherit the earth. That may be a new earth. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who's going to remain. So, but that would be a different category of people if we need to talk about them, and they will have different needs.
Well, they are a different category, those who remain. I mean, you look at the Georgia Guidestones, it says keep the population of the earth below 500,000. Mm-hmm. It doesn't tell us how we get there.
Yeah, I agree.
The point being is that I see doctrinal thinkers, both in religion and science, and then I see spiritual thinkers, and the difference between the two, very simple, is doctrinal thinkers seek guidance, spiritual thinkers seek the truth no matter where it takes them.
I agree with that.
And that is that's the thing there.
Marshall, I agree with you, and then I think that there is a danger of getting too caught up in the dogma of religion so that you can't see the forest for the trees sometimes.
I will definitely so. I'm not, I think I've told Marshall before that I'm mm-hmm. certainly not a religious person. I'm a very spiritual person, though.
You are very spiritual, and you're part of a group that, what I want to say to both of you guys, because to me, you're not only, you're spiritual thinkers and you're Christians. As I look at that 500 million that are going to survive this, all right, to me, the single largest demographic group of survivors are going to be spiritual thinking Christians. Hmm. That is the single largest demographic. It's the reason why I am starting to talk to them, because I view them as being the ones most capable of ensuring our future post-catastrophe.
A question I would ask you, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts here are. If the planet does evolve and it jumps to a fifth dimension from a third dimension, mm-hmm. do you feel like the survivors will be those those who inherit the Earth, so we're speaking of, are the ones that are now in the new fifth dimension to rebuild what is left of society? Or do you feel like that there will be a different, there are many philosophies and some science that says that there are 7 firmaments or 7 dimensions that actually create the Earth, and the Earth is the very center of those, each vibrating its own unique frequency, much like what Rick was referring to earlier. Explain to me your concept about what the Earth is going to do and what those who survive, where they're going to be. Do you feel like that this Earth is going to continue to exist, or do you think that the people jump to a different dimension, or does the entire Earth jump to a different dimension?
What I'm looking at is, and I base this on, I look at historical accounts. So you have Zechariah Sitchin, you have the ancient Egyptians, you have the ancient Hebrews, and there's folklore from around the planet. So what I am seeing is that we're going through a natural process. It will be a cleansing for the planet. But the people who get through this process, all right, people that really survive and endure, and not for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. We're talking about a process that's going to take years. It's going to be grinding. And a lot of people are going to fall into hopelessness and despair. And once that happens, it's a downward spiral. They're going to meet their end in any number of ways. The ancient Egyptians tell us about the great winnowing, where fear is going to winnow out a lot of us, because what is going to happen is a tremendous amount of fear is going to be whipped up, so much so that if you have malice and ego in your heart, it's like a lightning rod. It's going to pull these negative emotions into you, and your heart is going to be overwhelmed. You will die from fright. Just like the old joke says, I'm talking about something that's as serious as a heart attack. And literally, that is what we're told. So if you take all the moralizing and the theological aspects out of it, you just simply look at this as a very solid, simple basis of forces of love versus forces of fear. I see what's happening on the fear side, and they're pulling out all the stops. But I also see on the counter to that is the love side. Now, as a secular Jew, my viewing of Yeshua is as an ascended master was that he came and he planted the seed of our evolutionary thought. And that seed has taken root in many different souls and in many different ways across the globe. But out of that larger population, I see it bifurcated between the doctrinal thinkers and the spiritual thinkers. The doctrinal thinkers are going to be more easily seduced to the fear side of it. And so for them, I don't see any great advantage. But for the spiritual thinkers, regardless of what their faith is, if they have an affiliation, or however they walk with God, that is irrelevant. What is relevant about spiritual thinkers is, one, they have the strength to pursue the truth wherever it leads them. 2, their hearts are free of malice and ego. And 3, they live in a service to self mode where they balance their needs with the needs of others. In other words, they're thinking of the common good. And so this is a small subset of our current population. But as a catastrophism researcher, what all of the ancient folklore and history I have studied teaches me is that they are going to have a much greater ability to endure the deprivations and the hardships without losing their humanity. Ergo, they will be most likely to be the ones that shape that 1,000 years of peace that is predicted